So coming off of the previous chapter, we saw Gojo and Sukuna simultaneously activating their domain expansions. However, Sukuna's domain is open and doesn't close the way that Gojo's does. It also has a much larger radius. And because of this, Gojo's domain is essentially just a sitting duck within Sukuna's. And it's also very vulnerable to attacks from the outside. And this is exactly what Sukuna does, as he attacks it with his slashing attacks, breaking it, leaving Gojo himself vulnerable to Sukuna's slashing attacks, where we saw at the end of the chapter, he cuts cleanly through Gojo's neck. However, coming into this one, it turns out that Gojo was able to use his reverse curse technique instantly to heal, avoiding his head coming off completely, as we expected for the most part. But Gojo's problems aren't over here, because now that he has just used his domain unsuccessfully, he is now unable to use his limitless curse technique for a little bit. And as we've come to know from Gojo, most of his fighting style revolves around using limitless. So at this point, he's basically just a normal sorcerer. But first, let's talk about the sponsor of this video, Everlegion. Everlegion is like a mix of fantasy, chill, and gacha gameplay. It's got like 7 factions and hundreds of really cool heroes to choose from. It's also perfect for whether you're like a casual gamer or even a hardcore. And at this point, I'm kind of hooked on it, especially the Dragon Abyss. Plus, you can also score some Dragon Egg rewards. And on top of everything, it's free to play. But also, there's some big news, because Everlegion's first ever anniversary is coming up, and they're giving out a bunch of rewards. So first of all, by logging in during the event period, you can get 100 draws. That's right, 100 draws. And I'll just start off right now by doing like 10, and we could just, see what we get. Wow, I instantly just got Costanza. I saw her coming into the game and she was already like one of my favorites, so that's pretty cool. But also there's even more guys, because you can even participate in the lucky draw event for free. There's a chance to win full combination of all of the heroes, including the super rare divine and demonic characters. But even that is not all, because you can get all the upcoming heroes that will be released next year completely free. And last but not least, during the anniversary bash, there's going to be 30 extra pull codes for everyone on the server. So at this point, what are you waiting for? Join me on the battlefield and let's get in the action. Oh, and don't forget to use the unlimited anniversary redeem code, because if you do, you're going to get great gifts worth $100. So come join me in the event and let's draw all the heroes together. And if you win, please let me know in the comments. Thanks, guys. I mean, a really strong one and ultra talented, but without limitless, he is very limited. Now at this point, Gojo has to essentially escape from Sukuna's barrier, or he's going to get lit up from his slashing attacks the same way that Maharaga did back in the Shibuya arc. And as we also learned at that time, you can escape Sukuna's barrier by simply just running outside of the radius of it, since it's not closed. This is actually one of the binding vows that Sukuna put on it in order to make it so big and powerful. And normally Gojo would be able to do this. However, since he is unable to use limitless, he can't move fast enough. And Kusakabe explains this by saying that his instantaneous movement uses limitless curse technique to compress space and coordinates. And that's a great simplified way of putting it. It can also further explain how Gojo was manipulating his environment in the previous rounds, which we said was extremely similar to telekinesis, but Gojo was just compressing space and coordinates of other objects, which, mimics telekinesis more or less. And yeah, he's definitely not fast enough, and Sukuna instantly hacks away at Gojo with his slashing techniques inside of the domain, and it is vicious. One of the most violent sequences in the series by far. And as we talked about before, when Sukuna used this on Maharaga, he had obliterated him. One of the strongest, if not the strongest Shikigami ever, at least that we know of. Gojo, however, is taking this. I mean, yeah, he's getting lit up and slashed through nearly every inch of his body, but he's such a beast that he's able to use reverse curse technique simultaneously, surviving this. Just to show that, yeah, even without limitless, Gojo is still a super beast. And at this point, he tries to escape by running away, but Sukuna instantly capitalizes on him, and they go into a hand-to-hand exchange, which ultimately ends at a stalemate. Then we go into some more commentary, where it turns out that the center of the domain is not Sukuna himself, but it's the Malevolent Shrine. And going more into this, it seems like this is more so for the audience, if anything, where they explain that if you break break the shrine, in theory, it wouldn't really do anything because it's merely just like an aesthetic symbol, if anything. I mean, maybe this is going to come back into play later, especially since it's damaged at the end of the chapter. But this could just be Gege clarifying it in case we were curious about it. But also just using the shrine as a waypoint, you can just see how far you need to go to escape the barrier, I assume, which is like a near 200-kilometer radius. So I guess it's just clarifying that if Gojo runs away from Sukuna, it's not like the goalpost keeps moving, if that makes sense. But then we come back to the fight and Gojo activates Simple Domain, something we've never seen him use before. I mean, he hasn't really needed to use it. All of his fights have pretty much been squash matches up until this point. And Yuji's like, didn't Gojo say that he can't do that? And Kusakabe says, no, he said that he can't teach it. Natural geniuses can't teach for squat, which is very true even in real life. And it also, goes back into what we heard from other natural geniuses in the series, such as Shoko. When Gojo asked her how to use reverse curse technique, she couldn't really explain it since it came naturally to her. I'm sure you yourself watching this probably are really skilled in at least something, and it just came naturally to you. Like, you didn't really have to practice. You can kind of just always do it. And if you try to explain it to someone, it's probably difficult, or you can't really get your point across because you're just able to do it. Then we get some more exposition on how crazy of a genius Gojo really is, because like we said, he's coming off of using his domain expansion, which is nerfing his curse technique for a time limit. But on top of that, he's constantly using reverse curse technique and using simple domain at the same time, all while regulating his cursed energy and not running out. And of course, fighting Sukuna hand to hand at the same time. But we're also finding out, according to Choso, that compared to a real domain, the cursed energy output for simple domain will merely just buy time. And we see that, yeah, it dissipates very quickly, allowing for Sukuna to just go through Gojo like butter with his slashing attacks again. As to where right after Gojo activates simple domain yet again. But at this point, something really interesting happens, and Gojo stops healing himself with reverse curse technique. He's just allowing these wounds to fester and still going at Sukuna. And Akotsu, ponders like, no, he couldn't have ran out of cursed energy because, as we established, with the 6 eyes on top of Gojo's talent, he's just really efficient at using cursed energy. And it will replenish, in theory, faster than what he can expend. But in this case, it's a little different since he's going overdrive, continually using reverse curse technique right after he activated his domain expansion. And this definitely isn't the case. He still does have cursed energy to spare, but he's not using reverse curse technique because he's been healing his own curse technique. Because like we said, after using the domain, your curse technique is, as they say, burned out. And that Gojo is such a beast that he can use reverse curse technique to heal said burned out curse technique. So instead of just healing his wounds, he was healing his limitless curse technique, which, he can do it. I know it's kind of weird to think about, but it makes sense, I guess, in the Jujutsu world. And as soon as it comes back on, he magnetically latches onto Sukuna in a reverse backpack position, and then aims his fingers at Sukuna's face point blank and uses his curse technique reversal, red, like his projectile blast attack that we've seen him use against Jogo and Doji, which, as it says, is the reversed application of Limitless when you put reverse cursed energy into it instead of positive. Because as we've seen with blue, it's more of like a suction ability, but with red, it's more of a expulsion. And he blasts Sukuna point blank in the face after latching onto him. It wasn't like when he hit him with the hollow purple in the beginning where Sukuna at the last second was able to fester some kind of defense. It's like, no, he's taking this right on the face. But it does seem like Sukuna was able to move at least a little bit, because I guess his head would have been taken off, and it's definitely not here, but he did take some serious damage. And like I said before, he is blasted into the Malevolent Shrine, and it seemingly is damaged here. And I wonder if that's going to play into maybe some kind of weakness here. Like maybe the commentary that we got from the sorcerers isn't exactly entirely reliable. Or maybe they're just speculating themselves and they don't entirely know. That has happened before in this series. But that's where the chapter ends, with Gojo's comeback. He was down for the count, and his back was seriously against the wall for most of this round, but he ends it strong. And I don't know how much this is really going to hurt Sukuna because, you know, he could just reverse curse technique back from this, but it did really wound him. And Sukuna's like smiling at it, but he's definitely like, yeah, you got me. And in the final panel, we see Gojo once again using reverse curse technique to heal from the wounds that he allowed to linger while he was healing Limitless. And he's like, that wasn't easy. So yeah, the fight is far from over, guys. We're going into, I guess, round 4 at this point. And man, it's so exciting. I cannot wait to see how this plays out. Unfortunately, we are going on break next week, but I will have yet another collab with the Jujutsu Kaisen Avengers next week. So look out for that, guys, and subscribe if you haven't already. Have a great day. I'll see you in the next one.